Most people break when they're accused of something they didn't do. They cry, they panic, they get angry, they demand answers. But when detectives leaned forward and asked Emily Carter a single question, she smiled. Not nervously, not in confusion, not in disbelief. She smiled slowly, deliberately. And in that moment, seasoned investigators with decades of experience felt the entire case shift. Because sometimes guilt doesn't look like fear. Sometimes it looks like satisfaction. This is the story of a marriage that looked perfect from the outside, a death that initially appeared natural, and the half-second facial expression that detectives say changed everything. Emily and Daniel Carter had built what many would describe as a stable life, married for 9 years, 2 children under the age of 7, a modest but well-kept suburban home. Social media painted a picture of routine happiness, family barbecues, holiday photos, anniversary captions about forever. But curated lives rarely tell the full story. Behind the filtered photos, financial stress had been growing quietly. Daniel worked in logistics management. His hours had recently been cut. Emily worked part-time but had been increasingly vocal about wanting more security. 3 months before Daniel's death, he increased his fee. 2 months before his death, Emily opened a private savings account that Daniel didn't know about. Friends later told investigators the couple had been arguing more frequently, mostly about money, mostly about control. But arguments in marriages are common. Murder is not. Until the night everything changed. At 11:47 p.m., emergency dispatch received a call from Emily. Her breathing was quick, but her words were structured, clear, controlled. "My husband isn't waking up." When asked what happened, she said she'd been upstairs putting the children to bed. She claimed she heard a loud thud from downstairs. When she came down, she found Daniel on the floor near the couch. Paramedics arrived within minutes. There were no visible injuries, no signs of forced entry, no shattered glass, no broken furniture. The house was quiet, too quiet. Officers later noted something subtle. Emily wasn't crying. She wasn't hysterical. She wasn't asking if Daniel would survive. She was watching, observing, tracking the room. Shock affects everyone differently, but investigators are trained to notice when emotion doesn't match circumstance, and something about her calmness felt rehearsed. Detectives began reconstructing the timeline. The living room showed minor disturbance. A lamp was tipped over. A throw pillow lay on the floor, but the rest of the space was untouched. If there had been a collapse after a struggle, the disruption would likely be greater. This looked selective, placed, almost symbolic. Upstairs, the children were asleep. No signs they had woken up. No signs they heard a thud. That detail would matter later. The medical examiner initially suspected a cardiac event, but toxicology would take time, and detectives weren't convinced this was natural. They began looking deeper. 2 days later, Emily voluntarily came in for questioning. The interrogation room was intentionally neutral. Soft beige walls, single metal table, overhead lighting, a camera in the corner. Detectives started gently. "How was your marriage?" She smiled politely. "It was normal." "What were you arguing about recently?" "Nothing serious." "What about finances?" "That's every couple." She maintained eye contact. Her posture was upright. Her breathing was steady. Then came the shift. One detective leaned forward slightly. "Emily, did you hurt your husband?" And that's when it happened. She smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated, but unmistakable. A subtle lift of the lips, a flash of something almost triumphant. The room went still. One detective later described it as a smile that didn't belong in that moment. And in interrogation psychology, emotional mismatches are rarely accidental. There is a concept known as duping delight. It describes the subtle pleasure some individuals feel when they believe they are successfully deceiving someone. It's not loud, it's not obvious, it's a leak, a flicker, a smile that appears when it shouldn't. Emily's smile lasted less than 2 seconds, but detectives had seen that expression before. In fraud cases, in staged robberies, in domestic homicides. They didn't confront her about the smile. Instead, they did something more effective. They stayed silent. Silence is uncomfortable. Silence forces the brain to fill gaps.
Emily
And under
began
cognitive
repeating
pressure,
herself. I
stories
loved him.
begin to
I
fracture.
would never hurt him. This is crazy. But something was missing. She never asked how he died. She never asked what the autopsy revealed. She never asked what investigators believed happened. Innocent spouses typically seek clarity. Her focus remained on protecting her image. Detectives then revealed new information. Toxicology results had returned. Daniel's system contained high levels of a sedative, a prescription medication prescribed to Emily for sleep. Her posture changed immediately. Shoulders tightened, arms crossed, eye contact decreased. The smile never returned. Investigators obtained a warrant for phone data. What they found deepened suspicion. Search history from 3 days prior. How long does it take for sedatives to work? Can sleeping pills stop breathing? Overdose without pain? The searches occurred during a time Daniel was at work, not during the emergency, not after, before. That detail mattered. Forensics also found residue of crushed medication in a kitchen glass found in the sink. Only one glass. Daniel didn't normally drink water before bed. According to friends, he preferred tea. But no tea mug was found. Only the glass. And Emily had washed most of the dishes that night, except that one. When confronted with the phone searches, Emily inhaled sharply. That doesn't mean anything, but it meant everything. Detectives applied pressure gradually. They never accused outright. They presented facts. They waited. Silence again. Then Emily spoke quietly. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. The sentence hung in the room. Not a full confession, but not denial either. Investigators believe she crushed sedatives into Daniel's drink following an argument about finances earlier that evening. She intended to make it appear like a natural medical event, but toxicology exposed what staging could not hide. The tipped lamp, the selective disorder, the controlled 911 call, and that smile. Experienced detectives are trained to watch timing, not just emotion, timing. When does a person react? Before a question finishes? After evidence is presented? Or during silence? Genuine shock typically comes instantly. Guilt often surfaces slightly delayed because the brain must calculate. Emily's smile came immediately after accusation, not confusion, not fear, almost recognition. That timing told investigators they were close. Micro-expressions are involuntary. They last fractions of a second, but in interrogation rooms, fractions matter. During trial, prosecutors played the interrogation footage. They paused at the smile, replayed it, zoomed in. Jurors watched closely. Some later said that moment stayed with them. The defense argued stress response, nervous reaction, misinterpretation, but paired with digital searches, toxicology, and financial motive, the expression became symbolic. Emily Carter was convicted of second-degree murder. When people imagine criminals, they often picture rage, explosions of violence, obvious guilt. But sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's calculated, controlled, measured, and sometimes it smiles. In that small interrogation room beneath fluorescent lights, a half-second expression changed the course of an investigation. Because detectives don't just listen to words, they watch what slips through. And in this case, the truth slipped through a smile.